All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I am Paradise. I'm here with the great Ray Stans himself.
The great.
Yeah.
We can just go with Ray Stans. That works for me.
What about great Stans?
Sure, that's okay too.
All right, and we're here to Skibobble. This is Skibobble with Ray. We're going to talk about some music cultural happenings and just general musical pandering. Figure it would be a good time to take a stop and just have some open discussions about what's going on in the music world lately, I should say.
What is going on in the music world?
There's so much going on. Right now, the current thing seems to be beef. Beef is back in 2024.
It's been a minute. When was the last beef of this magnitude, or really any beef of note that we would remember or talk about?
I mean, the last beef per se was, I guess, Drake and Pusha T, and then before that it was Drake and Meek Mill, and then before that I guess it was 50 Cent and Rick Ross.
And those are like the top, like the beefs that got the most attention. You know, I'm also like, I know there was a little one with like Pusha T and Jim Jones like a while back.
Yeah, I mean,
there's like little skirmishes, you know, but not like an all-out war like we're seeing right now, which is kind of few and far between.
Yeah, there've been some one-off spats, but not to the magnitude of people anticipating like track after track, I would say, where
Right.
I think that's what this is escalated. And it's not even just the current fascination. There's also Chris Brown and Quavo who have been exchanging tracks as well.
Right. It does feel like a little bit like an earthquake lately, like some forces and tension have been building up, and all of a sudden everybody just wanted to kind of get their angst out, you know,
everybody in the Twitter world is kind of relating it to Shannon Sharp's show when Cat Williams came on there and started airing out other comedians, and ever since then things have been spiraling out of control. Now everybody's airing their grievances.
We got to get with Nikki because she'll understand the alignment of the planets in the universe and why all of a sudden everybody felt like they wanted to beef. You know, it's definitely some crackling energy. People like, you know, that happens, right? You see it in nature, like the goats or the bulls meet and then they just start butting heads, and it's like a thing that happens. So
if that's all it takes for people to be in their feelings, is planets moving around, then we've got some problems. We've got some problems as a species.
So,
but so where we're at right now? Well, I guess we can talk really quickly about the minor beef. Quavo and Chris Brown. Have you heard those tracks yet?
I did hear both once. I generally avoid. I mean, just for historical reasons, I don't typically pay much attention to Chris Brown material. I wasn't really ever a fan to begin with, and I haven't ever found myself going back to Chris Brown's music in general. But out of curiosity, I did listen to his diss track and Quavo's response.
Okay. It's a interesting one because this one seems more kind of like, I don't know, it feels personal, but it just seems like more like showmanship, like, oh, I did this first, or I had your girl, like, or we sat next to each other and I wanted to kind of just slap you. Like, it just seemed this seems like a silly, more of a misunderstanding than these two guys probably could never get along.
Right.
And I don't know.
That one I don't know much about like their personal history and if there's any like reason for animosity. It kind of, I would say the same thing about like Drake and Kendrick, apart from both vying for like the top spot. That's enough to, you know, to cause sparks and set off what's going on. But with Quavo and Chris Brown, I guess I wasn't sure why Chris Brown was dissing Quavo, you know, in this moment.
I never really paid attention. I mean, I can't say that I'm kind of the same. I can't say that I'm necessarily like a diehard fan of either of them. I've listened to their music, but you know me, I don't really gravitate to music and consume it like I used to anyway. If it's not on our Discord, I'm generally just kind of like, if I hear it, I hear it. If not, I'm not chasing it down. Right. So I'm familiar with, you know, Migos and Quavo, and I'm familiar with Chris Brown, but I don't know where this animosity came from. And listening to both of the tracks, I think I think that's kind of like an interesting back and forth between those two. I don't know how long that one will last, but I feel like that one will kind of just fizzle out pretty
I think
quickly.
so. Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, it's not going to get headlines in the wake of the big one that's going on. I don't think, and that really flared up majorly last night. I will say this: I say it begrudgingly. I feel like Chris Brown had the better kind of technical showing all around.
Yeah, and I think that's the one thing I can give Chris Brown credit for. While I may not be like an absolute fan of him and his music, I do respect that when he does do like rap songs, he's pretty good at it. He's got a very good pen, and I think Quavo is kind of outmatched on a not even necessarily a musical standpoint, but definitely on a I'm gonna write the better catchy the more interesting stuff. Chris Brown definitely has the edge in that. Whereas Quavo is just gonna go off of like whatever he feels like saying just because he just wants to respond.
Right, right. And I would kind of contrast that with the other beef. It's like um, Chris Brown and Drake, I feel, have a good middle of the road pop sensibility pen,
Yeah.
and then Quavo is kind of the more like like pop or just like that lane of music, like with the more so the tonality and less about the lyricism, and kind of the vibe. And then Kendrick's
Right.
like the way opposite end of the spectrum, like obviously very lyrical, Pulitzer Prize winner, critically acclaimed, but like we're talking about pretty deep lyrics that involve some unpacking and deconstruction and not always immediately accessible to a general, like the center of the audience, where people want to hear things that they understand quickly and don't have to think too much about.
Yeah. So I guess let's get into the whole Drake Kendrick thing. Is it seems like from a fan standpoint, everybody wants people to choose sides, and I don't understand the diehard fanboy in people of like wanting to align themselves one way or the other. I don't know. It's just odd to me.
Did you have any bias along those lines before any of this kicked off? Would you have sided with Kendrick to begin with or Drake to begin with?
I mean, to be honest, like if I go back and I think about all the music that I would listen to, I probably have a ton more Drake liked and favorited on a playlist than I do Kendrick tracks. But like if I just went in blind, would I say, "Oh, I'm gonna probably side with this person more than the other"? No. I mean, it's just music to me. It's not a personal feeling or level of attachment to it. Because,
Yeah.
like I said, I don't know these guys, so why the fuck should I care?
I think what's interesting in our perspective, I don't know, it's like not to tell on us, but like, both a little bit older, like on the kind of hip hop fan spectrum, been around a little while longer. I can remember like both when Drake and Kendrick started to like hit the scene and get traction. And it was roughly around the same time, I want to say.
Yeah.
And like I remember hearing Drake tracks, and I remember like listening to some of the Section 80 stuff. But neither of them for me became like, kind of like linchpin core artists where like I was following them religiously. I just hear whatever as time went on and not develop any fandom or bias towards either of them personally.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I definitely remember when Drake was starting out because the studio I was working at the time, people were kind of anticipating because he was working so closely with Jay Prince and people in Houston. We were working on a Slim Thugs album at the time, and people were kind of like anticipating that Drake might come through just because of connections that we had and whatnot. Never panned out that way, but like I remember the buzz around him, and to be honest, listening to his first couple mixtapes and even up through his first album, he had like a song or two here and there that I liked, but it wasn't like, oh man, I didn't necessarily latch onto it like, oh yeah, I can see it. I knew he had a big buzz around him, but I wasn't like, I didn't see the vision at the time up until like Take Care came out, and then I started to like more of his catalog, and then kind of beyond that, and even with Kendrick, I didn't really listen to his first couple projects until like probably 4 or 5 years after they came out. And then I kind of did a revisit once he kind of had that stability. And I think that's kind of more the thing with me. I don't know about you, but like usually when people come out and they're generating that first bit of buzz, unless like I hear some track that kind of blows me away, I generally don't go back and I listen to it until they hit their second album stride, because then I have something more consistent to compare it to.
Yeah, I don't know. I maybe, yeah, it's like we all have our artists that everybody's got their own sort of musical DNA, their top 5 or 6 people they listen to on repeat. And like as time goes on, you stop paying as much attention or putting as much thought or like stake in a certain artist. And yeah, I think similar. I feel similarly. I don't have any particular bias towards either artist.
Yeah.
It makes it really interesting to just see how people are reacting and perceiving the current beef and what their opinions and attitudes are.
So what's your take on Drake in this spat so far? How do you think that he's faring against competition, I should say? Because it's not really just Kendrick. It seems like there's several people who've kind of just thrown shots his way, although the biggest amount of attention right now is just between him and Kendrick.
Yeah, which is really interesting too, because like, you know, we're all following this pretty closely. You know, I popped in VC and I was so bewildered because I thought we pop in last night and I didn't even say anything. I just listened to like, what's the, what's the tea? What are people talking about? And I'm like, why am I hearing Kendrick right now? Like, what are they listening to? And it's like the response had already come out, like,
Yeah, he didn't wait. He waited 25 minutes and dropped another track after
which
Drake.
which I got to give him credit. Like it's a phenomenal tactical move. Like it's
Yeah.
just that alone. Like forget the music. Like in this whole thing, like that's pretty brilliant. Like
Yeah, don't
maybe
let your opponent get too much buzz. Go back
yeah.
and kill it.
Maybe he had inside info. Maybe he didn't. It appears like he did. Or maybe he had it ready. Like kind of calling it like Meet the Grams versus Family Matters. It makes it seem like those claims that he's making about like leaks in the other camp and stuff like that. And but yeah, if you're asking me specifically about like Drake and how he's faring, like I think back to um, Drake's beef with Meek Mill, and like I just remember him handling it well, and like the tracks he put out in my mind, they got more traction in my mind as like a casual listener, and the beef was entertaining, and I didn't feel like a type of way about Meek or about Drake, and I walked away with the perception that Drake had kind of took that one because took the back-to-back approach. The songs were catchy, and that's something I kind of feel like I see being discounted and not given enough credit. Like in the current conversation, is that that aspect of listenability and replayability in a catchy song. And I see Drake going back to that, but also stepping up and bringing at least some pen, and kind of saying some interesting things and displaying the proficiency. I see a lot of people say, no, Kendrick got Drake to rap again. And, the thing that blows my mind with all this, and it's been a maxim for a long time, and Jay-Z said it, it was like, oh, if lyrics sold, I would have been Talib Kweli, right?
Hmm.
And so, like, there's always this people who get to this, they get in the commercial business and they get to a certain level, like, you're going to make that choice at some point. And I'm not saying like Drake could go back and be like comparable to Kendrick with the pen, but Kendrick or Drake's no slouch, like he's gonna step up and do something reasonable, and
Yeah.
so I'm not surprised with his showing. I think he's brought the more compelling all around diss tracks in my mind. I'm not saying Kendrick's had bad tracks and they've gotten better, especially with the latest one, some of the tone and vibe that's there, but Drake kind of had the more classical diss track in my mind, and the more compelling material overall to this point.
Let me ask you this, because I know this this comes up all the time, and I commonly see people use this against Drake, and Kendrick mentioned it in his latest diss track. Are you convinced, or how do you feel about the speculation that Drake uses ghostwriters? Like, does that bother you in the least bit about Drake as an artist?
Not at all. Not at all. I've been thinking about it, and it's one of those things that I see. There's a lot of allegations that swirl around Drake. I'm in the lounge just challenging people, say like, I don't know because I don't follow it that closely, but if it's there, show me the receipts. And a lot of the chatter around that seems to be with like the particulars of writing credits, like for music, and what
Right.
people have seen on tracks. And um, I don't know what people expect. Like, the president of the United States has a speechwriter. right? Because this is an important person who has a lot of other obligations, who doesn't have as much time as maybe he used to sit down and craft his own message. But the person who's going to write for him, if they're even writing at that level, in the case of the president, of course, they are writing entire speeches, that's to be expected. Like Drake is arguably, by certain metrics, the top of the game.
Yeah.
He's a commercial powerhouse. He has to deliver compelling material. And if I get to his level, I'm doing the same thing. Like I want somebody who knows me, who can help me write in my voice and create things. And I'm going to invest in that to maintain myself. So that's not a diss or a dig. I mean, I know we're all purists about like rap and your pen and like, authenticity, but I'm sorry, you have to be more realistic with that notion. And meanwhile, it's probably exaggerated in a lot of cases. Maybe there are some songs where there's been a lot of like wholesale writing that was given to Drake, but I have a feeling in a lot of cases, he as an artist and as a person is going to feel a lot more comfortable with a lot of it. Maybe people make starts for him. Maybe they give him some material and he can kind of like, mark it up and rearrange it, or I don't know what's happening, but
yeah,
if it's even entire songs, I still don't care. Like he's at that level and he can afford to do that, and you should be. It's a smart move to do that.
The thing that I told people on our Discord lounge last night was this: if you're so hung up, well, first and foremost, I still don't understand why hip hop has to be one person can only pen their lyrics. Every other writing genre, people collaborate, they work with a team of writers just to get the best song out of the door. And I understand from a hip hop aspect, it was built on like personal stories and tribulations. But I told somebody, it's starting to feel like baseball's unwritten rules. It's like, oh, you can't swing the bat after you hit a home run, and oh, you can't like take your time running to the base, like all this unwritten bullshit that nobody really should be held accountable to, but everybody like keeps it in place just because they feel like it adds some merit or value, and it really doesn't. But my main point to everybody was like, when you tell me that, oh, Drake uses ghostwriters, several things go through my mind. Is like, A, you're telling me that you assume that you're in the studio every time Drake records. B, you're also telling me, based on my personal experience, you've never even been in a studio before, in not just like a small studio where they have one room, but I'm talking about multiple recording rooms where like somebody might be in one room working on their album, somebody's in another room, and they're like booked for a week straight, and like people are just like doing things.
Right.
And what happens in that scenario, and what I think has happened a lot of times in Drake's career, because also we should always remember that Drake has been hired to write songs for other people. So to call Drake a user of ghostwriters while he's also a ghostwriter, it seems kind of like a conflicting story. But one thing that I feel like, based on my own understanding of how studios and like musician environments work, is like you've got Drake in one room, and let's use the two people who have been mentioned as ghostwriters, Quentin Miller and then Lil Yachty. Let's say that Quentin Miller was in Studio B, Drake's in Studio A, and Drake's A&R, he's like sitting there listening to whatever tracks Quentin Miller's pumping out, and he's like, hey, I think you have something here, but he knows Quentin Miller just doesn't have what it takes to bring it over that, that hurdle and make that a hit song. He's like, Drake, come in here and check out this song. Drake hears it. Drake's like, you know what? I can make that a hit for you. I'll give you writing credits. Let me take this song. Let me put my spin on it, and let's make it a hit. Because it wasn't like Quentin Miller was not in the writing credits at all. It's just that he's like, maybe he heard what Quentin was working on. He's like, yo, that's a dope song. I'm not going to take it from you, but let me take it and make it better. And I'll give you the credit. We'll pay you. We'll keep you in touch and everything. And then what happens with the bullshit from hip hop is like somebody takes those reference tracks and they're like, oh, look, Drake had a ghostwriter because Quentin Miller did, 70% of the song. And then Drake's got his stuff on it with, these like little twists and shit. And I feel like that same thing probably happened with nobody's going to want to hear necessarily a Lil Yachty song. I mean, I know he has his fan base, but if Drake hears a Lil Yachty song and Yachty doesn't know what to do with it, his team is like, we can't market and promote this. Yo, Drake, can you do something with this? Right. Bet, I got you. Let me take that song, put my I don't think it's that fucking serious.
Right. No, it's not. It really isn't. And it's just something that people are latching onto to reinforce the bias. Because, the other thing about this is like, there's no absolute answers here. Like Drake's gonna have a fan base who's always forgiving and isn't talking about this shit like we are. Like some of us hip hop heads who might like say, is he pure hip hop, or is it like pop, or get into it and kind of chop it up and dissect it like this. A lot of people don't care. They just want to hear the music on the radio and enjoy it, and that's why he has such a large fan base, and why he can go on international tours and stuff, because he's leaning into that and not pandering to like us having conversations in the back room about pen purity and all that. I don't remember where I was going to go at that point, but it's like, I hear people saying these things and the one thing I'm nervous to defend about Drake, and I was asking for receipts in the lounge, is the allegations of grooming underage girls and pedophilia. Like nobody wants to be on the wrong side of defending Drake, and there is this questionable video footage of concerts and this, the thing about Millie Bobby Brown, which I looked into because I didn't know much about it. And I did find that she had posted a story on her IG that was y'all are weird. This is a person who's in Hollywood who's just trying to help me stop creating insinuations and innuendos. And look, if there's more there and it comes to light and it's true, that's horrible. And he deserves to be aired out for it. And he shouldn't be continuing to trade without fair criticism and judgment and punishment for that. But also the writing, those allegations, other things, it gets amplified and bandied about and taken as fact in the discussion when it isn't, it's not that firmly established. And same can be said for things that have been said against Kendrick. Right. I hear Drake saying things that I can't substantiate myself, being a casual observer trying to follow up on it. And so,
it's all hearsay. And that's what I told the guys last night. I was like, the one thing with, I know there's the video about on the stage where there's the girl who was 17 or whatever, and he, and if we look back at shit that happened 10, 15 years ago, a lot of rappers said things and did things that wouldn't fly in today's world. So I know Drake is probably a little bit newer to it, and it's not necessarily an excuse for it. He fucked up, and there's video evidence of it. That's just something that he has to live with.
All right, so you asked me about how Drake is faring. Let me ask you about how do you feel that Kendrick is faring in the beef?
So I think Kendrick is holding his own in the style that benefits him the most, right? Because stylistically, Kendrick, while he has some flashy songs and some flashy moments, everybody's expecting him to be the lyricist, the pen game stuff. So I think that's the element and the approach that he's taking. I'm not gonna wow you with an anthem. I'm gonna write the most scathing things in the most intricate ways and deliver it to you just straight raw. And I think he's taking that approach, and it's working, because the people who, but also in the same sense, the people who expect that out of Kendrick love it. But also it seems like there's been a whole bunch of people waiting for Drake's downfall who are just capitalizing on this to say, yeah, fuck Drake. Kendrick's really killing him with this one. And it's not necessarily the most scathing things. Like you said, I mean, it's all kind of speculation with the pedophile, and I was telling him also, it's I don't think Drake, as big as he is, I understand, we don't know everything about these people, but just my view of Drake from the outside world, I don't think that he would ever put himself in a position where pedophilia is in his backhand repertoire, right? I don't think he's grooming girl. He probably has millions of girls who offer themselves to him, but I don't think he's necessarily needs to groom underage girls in order to feel accomplished.
I don't know. It's a crazy thing to talk about, right?
It's a crazy thing to talk about.
Well, because I kind of agree with you. It's when you're at the top and you don't want to risk it, but then, there are people who get to the top and they do shit like that.
But if you look at
they're so powerful that they can I can have women in my mansion, and it'll be oh, it's all good because but it's not, because you're doing coercion,
and this is probably low hanging fruit, but the contrast between him and Diddy is where Diddy's always had these weird rumors around him about even 50 Cent's been making fun of him for years. Diddy's always had these weird rumors around him about scamming people, cheating them out of people. Drake's always been singing songs about breaking up with women. but not, he's never had rumors around him like, oh, he keeps underage girls around. Like, it's not like an R. Kelly Diddy, like, oh, this guy's got a history of all this kind of shit. Up until the Millie Bobby stuff came along, it was like nobody ever had this rumor about Drake.
All right, so let's go on record then. All right, so like, who knows what will come out in the future? I think what will happen is, after this, like, maybe there'll be another response, maybe there won't. I kind of think eventually it's gonna exhaust itself and taper out, and they'll go back to making their music, and we'll stop talking about it. And they're like, it's not gonna lead to Kendrick's downfall, for spousal abuse. I don't see credibility there. I don't think there'll be credible allegations against Drake that would like lead to his downfall. But I don't know. We don't know anything. Yeah. You said it's like, this is just speculation because these are people and entertainment that we're just talking about that we don't know shit about.
How do you feel Kendrick is faring?
At first I thought, he came out like a little bit weak out of the gate. Like, I didn't like the, we talked about this in the server, like sort of the tone and approach and the delivery was a little bit like, it was Kendrick. It was his avant-garde kind of like experimental jazz flows, which I personally don't think are a great choice for like a beef when you should just be from the chest, like, saying your disses and kind of keeping a consistent tone. Because that for me got a little bit distracting and came off a little bit strange. And I saw a lot of people expressing those sentiments as well. I think he kind of rebounded a little bit with the last two, it kind of got back on track. I will say, and I heard Lou saying this last night, it was like he brought more of the emotion and energy towards the end of the most recent track. Mm-hmm. I don't really vibe with his sort of like subdued, I'm superior, I'm the guy talking to you because I'm like, I know it all and like I have the moral high ground, and I don't buy all that. I just don't, like for the reasons we're talking about, because I don't know either of them. And, I don't put him on a higher pedestal than Drake or vice versa. Like, they're just two guys who are out there who happen to be sparring right now. And for me, like what kind of puts it at even, I would say right now, actually, I would have said probably Drake had the edge. And the other thing too, and I wanted to talk about this when we talked about talking about this, was let's not forget how this started, right? Like, the person who took the first shots was Kendrick, right?
Yeah.
And it was after the what was the Big Three Super Bowl? I forget what the J. Cole and Drake record was called, but like, he said Big Three, and then Kendrick, on the Like That verse, was the first person to take shots and say, nah, there's no Big Three, like it's just me. And then that was the bubbling over of the pot. So I don't know how you characterize like kind of the situation, but I would say like Drake is arguably by many metrics like at the top of the game, sales, notoriety, like, and it was said when this all kicked off, like, Eminem and Jay-Z had said they're going to come for you, like nobody wants, it's the natural order of things when somebody's, growing up Red Sox fan, up in the Northeast, like people hated the Yankees because they won too much. Yeah. And look, that's just what's happening now. Like with Drake, he's too popular, like always getting the, the credit, like always the topic of conversation. And it's the natural order of things. We want to be the king of the hill. We want to run up on who's up there and knock them off. So, kind of home court advantage. And like with that context and mindset, I feel like it kind of goes to Drake because like, Kendrick may have the better pen or have more critical acclaim, but like still, Kendrick went to Drake, for these reasons, and home court advantage goes to Drake. And I would have said up until last night that Drake kind of still had the advantage for being home court, kind of being the de facto leader, doing reasonable tracks. But Kendrick's tactical deployment of that last track was pretty masterful.
He didn't give it any space to breathe, and he put the clock back on himself. Whereas, like, okay, now Kendrick, you have to respond again.
Yeah,
he's like,
right.
Nope, I got it ready to go.
Bam, bam. Now it's on you again, buddy. Like, so, like I'd say now it's even, and maybe they should just leave it there. I don't think these allegations are going anywhere. Like, I think if I'm, Drake, do I really want to continue this at this point? Like, you put your video material out and it was pretty cool, and it it got stomped on, by Kendrick pretty quickly. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's a weird situation. Like the Kendrick fanboys will even probably say that it all started back on the Control verse, and then Kendrick had a moment in his BET freestyle where people are saying that that was aimed at Drake. So it seemed like all these years Kendrick's been throwing these pot shots out there, and like you said, like that was kind of the new tipping point of like, hey, I'm going to poke the fire again, and J. Cole responded, and then at the time when J. Cole said, you know what, I'm walking that back, I don't want anything to do with this, everybody gave him shit for it. It's like, oh, how are you gonna do all these features and verses and say that you're top of the game, and then all of a sudden you bow out of a battle? And I told people at the moment, I was like, there's probably a good reason that somebody who is as confident in their pen as J. Cole is would say, you know what, this doesn't feel worth the energy, because it started to get really personal, especially after like last night. It's like, we talked about some of the allegations, but Drake is basically saying that like Kendrick's the TDE manager fathered one of Kendrick's kids, and Kendrick is saying that Drake is hiding another kid. And like we said, I mean, these are all allegations, but they go beyond the I rap better than you bravado, and it's like these are really personal attacks that I don't think you can just walk back, which is why J. Cole probably caught wind of where this was going, and he's like, you know what? I'm not in the middle of what you two are going back and forth with right now. So
Right. Yeah.
myself out of.
He should wait. He should wait until He should wait until never, or some competitive moment where he has an advantage in strike.
Yeah. But one thing I wanted to get your take on, and I've been telling people this, and nobody seems to really be latching onto this, is like, for me, I know everybody, like the rap fans, like love this because it's like, oh, people are rapping again and all this stuff. But for me, I don't really like it from the aspect of we've got two talented individuals and we're cheering for them to tear each other down. And like I said, it's not in a I rap better than you manner anymore. It's gone beyond that to the point of like, hey, let me find whatever harshest thing I can think about your personal life and expose that to the world. And like I said, it's good for the attention on hip hop, but what do we really benefit from this? Like, me and Luce were saying, we don't think it's going to get to the level of Tupac and Biggie, but Biggie died as a casualty of like people siding with Tupac. Like,
right.
Biggie was never really a part of what happened to Tupac. People around Biggie may have been a part of what happened to Tupac, but Tupac, took it upon himself to blame everybody. Now, we don't think that this is going to get to that level, but at the same time, we're still rooting for like these two guys to like tear each other down, and things that used to be common. Like, we're never going to probably get another Drake and Future collaboration. Probably never going to get Kendrick and J. Cole collaborate. Like, all these things that we started to get familiar with are probably
at what cost? For a few minutes of entertainment. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that's my question to everybody at the end of the day is like, okay, this is great for this moment in hip hop, but at what cost did we just sacrifice the camaraderie that people should be working for? When we talk about like, one thing that we do at White Collar Rhymes is like try to get people established in whatever hobby or career. Like, when we should be working together and saying, hey, we should be fighting for like artists to get better payouts and move away from streaming where you only get like half a penny per song. Like, we should be focused in unifying against that. But now we're like, hey, take the 2-3 biggest names and like, let's all pit against each other. And I don't know what cost we're actually benefiting from in the long run, like 5 years from now.
I also don't think guys like you and me really care that much. I mean, those collabs might have been nice, but like we weren't paying all that much attention to them anyway. Like there's all kinds of, this is like a beautiful thing, right? Like, it's like creation, like this industry has been flourishing for a long. I mean, music industry obviously has like its ups and downs, but like a nuance. But like, it's an amazing creative era with like it's accessible. Lots of people can make music, and there'll be plenty of great content out there. Despite that, these things might not happen. Hopefully, they did it. They say, what, like we got hot headed, and maybe I would accept that. Like I think that should be a.
I think we would accept that, but I don't think the general fans would accept. Like,
they'd be like, oh yeah.
Hands, then I don't know which fan base would turn on which artist the fastest, but I definitely know that people be like, oh, that's so soft. You can't shake the hands with the person who said that about you. Like I feel like the fan base of the fans now are more volatile than they were like in previous years, and I
Do
think
you,
that's probably the dangerous part.
do you think here's a very heavy question. Do you think anything about Drake's career or his artistic approach or the material he's put out puts him like out of bounds as like, hip hop, like he's not like really like a lyricist or a creator in the same sense as Kendrick or other people who are given more pen credence?
I don't believe so. I feel like Drake is definitely, I don't have a hierarchy, a ranking per se, but I think Drake is definitely in top 10 of whatever musical category in hip hop and even some R&B that you want to come up with. Like you can debate night and day about who wrote what, but he's still been on top of the charts, whether charts matter to you or not. He still had high quality songs, high quality albums, high quality features. He he has frequently taken artists with no traction and made them household names,
Mhm.
like such as Migos, Macanonin. The Weekend was really kind of just bubbling until he was on OVO. Like Drake has made people bigger than what they were just by support. Like the most recent example is Sexy Red. Like with Sexy Red, I'm sure she would have gotten that like internet viral like fame just because of her music. But with Sexy Red really be in the position that she's in, if Drake wasn't like, yeah, that's my girl, whatever she does, I rock with it.
Right.
Like I feel like you can dispute it emotionally all you want, but there's a whole lot of like quantifiable things that say Drake is one of those dudes.
Yeah.
Whether you like him personally, whether you hate the way he, like they said, talk, dress, look, say things, like you can name all those things in the world. Quantifiably, the dude's that guy if you need something done and it needs to be impactful. And I think the same thing can be said of Kendrick as well. It's like that's why I say like I don't have a hierarchy, but I think both of those guys top 10 and whatever you want to like throw them up against. Like I think they can both show up and be that guy on any given day. And I think that's what's happening right now. It's like one day he's on top, the next day the other guy's on top. And I don't think anybody necessarily wins in this, like you said.
If like let's say hypothetically a year from now you or me somehow got viral and like started to blow up, which type of artist would you want to be regarded as? Would you want to be more like in like a Drake style of artist, like in the public perception, or more of a Kendrick style of artist in the public perception?
I would want to be Drake. Like and here's the and it's like the personal shameful reason why. It's like I've always wanted to wished I had the vocal chops to actually sing. Like I get jealous when I write something that can be sung and I
Mhm.
can't hit those notes.
Yeah.
And like to hear him like he not just him but like other artists who can do that kind of bounce back and forth between like rapping and singing flawlessly, it irritates me. So yeah, I would love to be Drake where I can just, I'm gonna sing this song. I'm gonna sing half of this song or a quarter of the song, and nobody say, "Oh, well, you sung that part wrong. You shouldn't do that anymore." Like,
Right.
I would love to have that flexibility of just like, I'm gonna make an R&B album today, or I'm just not gonna make an R&B album. I'm just gonna rap today, and that's not a knock against wanting to be a better lyricist, but for me, chasing fans who only admire you for your lyrics, you run into this like weird sector of hip hop where they're either wholly on your side or they're your biggest enemy. Where it's like
Yeah.
nothing, and that's the little debate that me and Luce had last night because Luce was like, "Oh, well, he's saying stuff," but I like kind of what you hinted at, like he didn't like the way it was being delivered, where it's like, "Oh, the bravado of like I'm already better than you, so I'm just gonna not really put any mannerisms or energy into how I'm delivering it." And I'm
Right.
like, and I was telling Lucis like, what you're telling me sounds like nothing Kendrick does is gonna please you at this point. It's like,
Right.
and that's what I try to ask these fans. It's like, okay,
But
well, they're saying like, oh, Drake didn't come hard enough, Kendrick didn't come hard enough. I'm like, what do you guys want them to say at this point? You know, the allegations that they're throwing around right now are pretty strong. What do you guys want them to say that would make you think that, oh, that's the nail in the coffin?
The interesting thing about it though is like I was like, I'm gonna go do my homework. Like I'm not, like I'm not a huge Kendrick fan. I went back and listened wall to wall to Section 80, like his first, major commercial release, and then most of To Pimp a Butterfly. And he does, I don't know if it's like effortless and like, like the way that we're talking about, like that Drake does it, but like he has a great, music, rhythmic, and like he does great like tonal things. Like he really like really interesting constructions and these 6-minute tracks, and like it's a lot of times it's fully listenable, like the whole track, and you don't get bored. And I mean, there's a reason, he deserves all the credit, but like he didn't even really employ that very much, like in the the diss records where he could have, to great effect. I think if like you are drawing the audience into what you're saying, he just kind of he went for like the lecture route almost, or like
he went for the stern parent talking to, then the I'm gonna musically make you interested and engaged in what I have to say.
But I kind of agree with you though. Like, and this is surprising to my own self and my own artistic exploration, was like I came to the Discord excited about lyrics. I had written lyrics, and I was like, great matching words and rhyming, and like just deep concepts and vocabulary. And it's still part of what I do and what I want to do, but also like I find myself gravitating just naturally more towards like what sounds better musically, and like what can I achieve, and can I like do something more melodic, and more sung here and there, like either try a hook or put something like that in the verse. And I find that I enjoy making that more. And I also find like people seem to respond better to that, and it draws me in that direction. But man, Drake is just making more of the more consumable bubblegum stuff, whereas Kendrick is making more of the, it's like Section 80 is regarded as like kind of a fusion of like, jazz beats, or like jazz elements in the beats, and then like the kind of quote unquote abstract hip hop, it wasn't a mainstream or a gangster record, it was like abstract or like independent kind of backpack style type thing, like it's more experimental. I don't really know if that's like how people characterize his full body of work in all his albums, but
I mean, that's kind of my perception of it. And, I agree. I mean, and, maybe it's because I've been doing this so long, but like I tell people all the time, like I started out kind of the same as you, as like I wanted to write like the dopest lyrics and all this other stuff. And like as I've progressed in my career, I think I just want to make the best song. And the song that somebody can listen to and it hits them somewhere there where they're like, you know what, I get it. And whether that has like the most interesting concepts in it, or whether it's just me expressing like a vulnerability, however that's delivered, I just want it to be the best song. And it's not a knock on people who prefer like the lyrical stuff. Like you can be Lupe Fiasco and Black Thought and Royce and Eminem all you want to, but at the end of the day, to me, I think the most appealing songs are the songs that like I can listen to, and it puts me in a moment of recognition with either myself or with that artist of like whatever they're describing. And I think both Drake and Kendrick can do that, but I think they're just taking this two different approaches on it. And it's interesting. It's interesting to see that it's really has divided the community 50-50 on it.
And I think that Drake just sort of naturally trends towards, like, he even said it, like he's like, I got everybody in the club singing to this record, like he knows he's in his lane of making the best song, the one that's got the melodic motifs and the rhythm and the kind of cadence that like gets in your head. Whereas Kendrick would probably agree he didn't necessarily do that if you were to ask him, like he didn't aim for that. He aimed more for like I called it the
artistic,
the lecture, like the lecturing and the more artistic elements. And for me, I see that as like a risky choice, like in the context of like a beef situation, because it's happened. I mean, we've seen that perception, and but the people who really kind of back him, like the people who root for his camp, they love that. They expect that. And they don't have a moment of like
doubt.
Like
they're not questioning his approach.
He murdered him. He did Kendrick, and he murdered him, and it's over. And it's like, well, I'm not so sure, like, so that's how I feel.
Yeah. And I told the guys also, is like, I don't have a dog in this fight. All I can tell you is I've listened to all of the Drake tracks probably like 5 or 6 times, and I've listened to the Kendrick tracks once, maybe twice each. So
that was the one metric I wanted to check. It's like the really interesting one now. It's like you can look at sales, awards, whatever. How many plays does each track have? They both dropped around the same time last night. Like I wonder who's out in front right
there
now.
was a moment where like they were accusing Kendrick's camp of using bots because Drake's track, it was like 15 minutes in and it had 100,000 views, and Kendrick's track had 1 million views. The last time I looked last night, they were about the same at 1 million views each. But it was interesting. Somebody screenshot and they're like, "Yo, why does Drake have only almost 200,000 views? Kendrick's track just came out 7 minutes ago and it's already at 1 million." Like people are watching that kind of stuff. Like, and that's what I said. Us like really divided the community in so many different ways. Some of them I feel like are objectively wrong. Like people are now saying that can't say the N-word unless you have a black mom or unless you have 4 black grandparents, and like we had that whole discussion and stuff too. I was like, you know what? It goes back to what I was saying is like everybody's cheering because they're like, yeah, this is a big moment in hip hop. But I was like, man, the conversations that are coming out of some of these camps as outshoots of this are negative to the culture. Like we shouldn't be going back and like pointing at people who we used to be allied with and saying, you know what, you're not one of us anymore. And I feel like that's the discussions that are harmful to the community.
Yeah, there are definitely some negative consequences to this. The one thing I find really interesting is like, again, so not to call more attention to us being, hip hop fans for a longer time than some of the people on the Discord, but like it seems like, Drake and Kendrick are both like a little bit older themselves, because a lot of the artists who are hot are very young. A lot of the fan base for them is very young.
Yeah.
But like they seem to have pretty heavy cultural relevance to like even newer music fans. And like the newer music fans are, as I was thinking about it earlier, like surprisingly engaged in this conversation. And they have sharp takes too. Like they're not slouches. Like they're saying a lot of the stuff that we're saying. Like they break it down in a similar way. And that's just been unique to see, like, kind of in the recent days.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. So, I mean, I guess we'll wait and see what the next reply, if there's a reply. I feel like there will be. So I don't know what the end of this will be, but.
So when you do this next time, you got to bring in somebody who's more biased towards one camp or the other. Maybe get like Lamathy, get a Passive or a Lamathy to come on here, or both of them. And like in a week, do it like in a week or so and see what they're saying.
I'm okay with doing that. I just don't want people to be in their feelings, because at the end of the day, like I can turn this off and I don't care. But I know the hip hop heads, much like the rock metal heads, those people are very passionate about it, and I don't want people to be upset at me when I say, you know what, I don't give a shit. Right.
I don't care. For somebody saying they don't agree, like we should all hopefully. But I get it. Like some people really live the culture, and like if they that's their prerogative to feel that way. And
absolutely, I'm 100% okay with somebody coming in here and saying, Kendrick murdered Drake, he did all this, or Drake was the best ever and he did 1, 2, and 3 so excellent. I'm perfectly okay with that. Just don't get in your feelings when I say, you know what, that really doesn't mean anything, because there's nothing to prove any of the things that you just pointed out. Right. Like you said, when you're asking for receipts, when I say, okay, well, show me Drake's hidden daughter, or show me where, Kendrick's manager fathered the kid, like show me the proof of this. Like if these things are so scathing, then there has to be some paper trail, right?
Right. Something. So
yeah.
So are we just gonna call it a draw right now? Like at this point,
I'm calling it a draw. I mean, to say that somebody's winning at this point means that I feel like, me personally, I feel like means I'm aligning with some of the things that have been said recently. And like I said, I think after last night with the scathing content in both artists' side, it doesn't feel like a normal rap beef. Right. It feels like there's much more to this, and I'd rather call this a draw than feel like I'm siding with some of the stuff right now. And maybe I'm just kind of overblowing it, but like with the way people are gravitating to some of the rumors and the stuff that's being said, I don't feel comfortable saying, one person's on top or like I feel like we're equally winning and losing at the same time.
Yeah, well, certainly makes for interesting discussion.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll call it here. This has been the White Collar Rhymes Skibobble with Ray. Until the next beef, I guess, ruptures and boils over, we'll keep an eye on the streets and see what happens.